if you're roughly 35 to 45 and you're feeling out of sorts, not quite yourself, and you think it might be your hormones, here's what's going to happen. You will go to the doctor who will order some blood tests. They will come back and you'll be told everything is normal. And you might be ushered out the door at that point, or offered the pill, or even antidepressants. How do I know this? Because I hear this story every single week in my hormone clinic, and it was my exact experience too. So stick around because I'm going to explain what is going on and give you 2 secrets in how to correct that. And it all starts with our lovely calming hormone progesterone. So in my late 30s, early 40s, I started struggling with a range of symptoms. I was exhausted, I was irritable, I had skin, bladder, period, and sleep issues, and my previously managed anxiety had come back with a vengeance. And I started gaining weight despite eating well and exercising. I went to the doctors, he ordered some blood tests, the blood tests came back, and he said to me, "Your bloods are so good, I wish mine were as good as yours," and he ushered me out the door, and that was that. In fact, put relate in the comment if you've had this experience as well. But what I now know is that I was perimenopausal, my adrenals were exhausted, and I was on the blood sugar roller coaster. And that's because from our mid-30s, our ovarian function begins to slow and we enter the perimenopause. Our lovely calming hormone progesterone falls off a cliff, and as we move through perimenopause, estrogen begins fluctuating wildly. So in any given month, we can experience symptoms of low progesterone, for example, anxiety, hormonal headaches, period issues, sleep issues, as well as symptoms of both low and high estrogen. And our modern way of living exacerbates all of this. So as our ovarian function slows, the adrenal glands, they take over that role of making estrogen and progesterone. However, our adrenal glands are responsible for making our stress hormones, and for most women, by our mid-30s, the adrenal glands are completely exhausted. We live far too busy lives. We may be raising children, caring for elderly or sick relatives, working, being a good friend, keeping the house in order, going to the gym, exercising, looking after ourselves, rushing here, there, and everywhere, being all things to all people, and never ever asking for help. At the same time, we have social media, 24-hour news cycles, never-ending emails, traffic, pollution, ultra-processed foods, all of these things which add extra layers of stress. Now, when the brain feels constantly stressed, it believes that there is a threat to life. And when there is a threat to life, making appropriate amounts of estrogen and progesterone is not a priority. It just needs to keep making stress hormones to give you the energy to fight or flight from the stress. And so all of your hormonal symptoms get worse, get more intense, you feel worse and worse, the weight gain keeps coming, and you get no answers from your doctor because they're not looking at you as a whole person and they're not testing for the right things. So in actual fact, the first thing that we can do is take radical responsibility for our own health and become our own best health advocate. I try to help you do that with these videos, and in fact this is the final video in a whole series on raising progesterone levels naturally. I will link to the playlist up above here. If you haven't watched the other videos, do go back and check those out because there's videos on food, supplements, and mistakes to avoid when trying to increase progesterone levels naturally, because when it comes to hormones we always have to take a holistic view, which leads me to my first secret: focus on the whole. Now, I did talk about this very briefly in this video here, but I want to expand on this because focusing on the whole is key to your hormonal health. Hormonal symptoms don't just appear out of the blue. They come from years of not tending to your hormonal needs, through this fast-paced life that we live in, which is not conducive to women's health, not always eating or having access to nutrient-dense foods, and the big one, not addressing our emotions. Time and time again, I see women with trauma, emotional upsets, grief, loss, etc. in their timeline, and the emotions around that haven't been addressed. As women, we often have to suppress how we're feeling and just get on with things. So I encourage you to look at your hormonal timeline, and this is something that I do with all of my clients, going right back to what was your mother's pregnancy with you like, what was labor like, were you breastfed, did you have many antibiotics as a child, what age did your periods start, what were they like at that point in time, have you had the pill or any other hormonal contraception, any pregnancies, if your periods have become problematic, at what point did that happen, what was going on at that point, or even 6 to 12 months in the lead up to that. And then we add into that timeline any emotional upsets, shocks, traumas, injuries, accidents, medications, operations, big life changes. Doing this gives us clues as to what needs to be treated because we can see what came before the hormonal discomfort. And often it's one of two things: synthetic hormones and emotional upsets. And this is where my homeopathic remedies become really useful, because we have remedies that can detox synthetic hormones out of the body, and we have remedies that cover things like never been well since. So for example, never been well since abuse, shock, synthetic hormones. We also have remedies that cover ailments from, so ailments from financial loss, indignation, humiliation, grief, and so forth. And I often prescribe these remedies more than I prescribe the traditional female hormone remedies. So when addressing the whole, yes, of course, we need to look at nutrition, we need to look at stress, we need to look at exercise, we need to look at sleep, but we also need to be digging deeper and looking at what in your timeline has caused dis-ease in the hormonal sphere. If we have an emotional upset or a trauma in the background that hasn't been addressed, that could be adding to our stress, even if we're not consciously aware of it. And extra stress always comes at the expense of progesterone production. Equally, if our natural hormone production has been suppressed by hormonal contraception, that's going to affect your current day hormonal production. So we always want to be looking deeper and looking at why we're not making the correct amount of hormones for this time of life and addressing that. Okay, secret number 2 is blood sugar balance. So even though I've said everything I've just said about addressing the whole, if you want a quick win, you need to be eating to balance your blood sugar levels. As our hormones begin to fluctuate, specifically estrogen, we become less sensitive to the message of insulin and we end up on the blood sugar roller coaster. And in this state, we gain weight, we have low energy, low mood, and sleep issues. And because all hormones are connected, if you're on the blood sugar roller coaster, you're going to have excess cortisol, which is going to come at the expense of progesterone production. So you want to specifically look at your consumption of refined carbohydrates and sugars and try to remove these things from your diet. And instead focus on eating high protein, lots of fibrous vegetables, and healthy fats. This is particularly important at breakfast time. A high protein breakfast or a blood sugar balancing breakfast will set you up for better blood sugar balance throughout the rest of the day. So instead of a pastry and a coffee on the run, something like eggs, vegetables, and avocado would be a fantastic alternative breakfast. And for better blood sugar control, make sure you're eating within an hour of waking, and if you do drink coffee, have it after your breakfast. But essentially, every single meal you want to be focusing on protein, fibrous vegetables, and healthy fats. When you eat like this, you're naturally satiated, you don't crave sugar, you don't crave carbs, your mood, your energy, your weight all balance out and stabilize. And going back to focusing on the whole, I always say to my clients, don't chase symptoms, focus on improving systems. As your systems improve, your symptoms will disappear. And as a perfect example of this, in my program, Haywire Hormone Fix, I get all of my clients to do an intake form which includes a tick list of symptoms. We then start the program with a 2-week metabolic reset where we're eating exactly like this: protein, vegetables, and fats. And after the 2 weeks, I get them to redo the tick list of symptoms, and that tick list of symptoms is always less than half than the original symptom list that they'd ticked 2 weeks previously. So always focus on improving your systems and your symptoms will disappear. And if you want help in this regard, do grab my free download. I will link to it in the description below. It's called Thriving in Your 40s and Beyond. It will help you with blood sugar balance, plus 2 other hormonal hacks to help you reclaim your mood, energy, and weight and get you back to feeling like your best self. Okay, a final note. Your hormonal symptoms, your low progesterone state didn't happen overnight. So getting better, healing doesn't happen overnight either. So please be kind to yourself, be compassionate, because healing does take time and it's never linear. There'll be really good days and there'll be some not so good days, but just be kind to yourself. And remember, symptoms are not the enemy. They are messages from the body letting you know that something is out of balance. And finally, we can't talk about low progesterone without addressing estrogen dominance. So that is going to be my next video series. So if you haven't done so, make sure to hit the subscribe button.